Maayong gabi, ako si Bea Cupin na ami karon sa International Media Center diri sa Mactan World Museum para sa 48th ASEAN Summit and other related meetings. Again, my name is Bea Cupin and with me here is my colleague who's based in Cebu, John Sitchon. And John, bag-uta mag-storya about unsay nang hitabo today. Daghan nang hitabo today in the context of ASEAN. Pwede ba explain mo sa amo how Cebu province has been preparing for this huge week?
Right. So ang National Organizing Committee ug ang Local Organizing Committee, of course, sa counterparts diri sa Cebu, ato ang mga officials gikan sa Cebu Provincial Government and the mayors nga gikan sa Lapu-Lapu City, Mandawi City ug Cebu City, nagkahiusa ug nagtigom sila in previous meetings earlier this year from January hangtod karon sa May, in recent since last week pa, ang ginasulti ni Cebu Provincial Governor Pamela Baricuatro nga naabot na sa 80% ang preparations kay tungod in previous pagyod nga months, gisugdan na nila ang pag-develop sa mga areas, ang pagplano sa mga road closures o mga lockdowns, ug syempre gitan-aw pod nila kung saon og implement ang security plans. And of course, ang ato ang mga opisyalis gikan sa Office of the Civil Defense, PNP, Army, and of course other concerned or agencies nagpadala og 10,000 nga mga security personnel para isigurado ang safety dili lang sa mga delegates nga mobisita dire. Of course, ensure pod ang security para sa atong mga residente, especially dire sa Mactan Island. And just a tidbit of information, diri sa Mactan Island, which is where the Mactan International Airport is, naa diri tanan ang mga tapok, ang mga pakighimamat sa mga international, sa mga ASEAN nations, ug ilang mga delegates of foreign ministers and of course heads of state para sa maong 48th ASEAN summit and related meetings. Actually, just recently nag-announce ang presidente, President Ferdinand Marcos Jr. og holiday, special non-working holiday diri sa syudad sa Lapu-Lapu from May 6 to 8. Ug kining maong declaration of a special non-working holiday gi-extend dili lang sa Lapu-Lapu City, gi-implement sa siya karon sa mga areas like in Cebu City and of course Mandawi City. In kaso na yung mga delegates nga mobisita pod sa Cebu City gubang closer neighboring cities. Syempre diri sa Mactan, Newtown, na yung mga road closures pod sa Peninsula Drive, na yung road closure sa Mactan, Newtown Drive, and of course sa Angasil Road. But most of the road closures here are very compact and very targeted lang siya sa kaning maong mga areas nga, and of course hotels nga gigamit as venues para sa ato ang 48 ASEAN meetings and of course the related meetings. Sa pagkakaroon atong nasusi nga nag-invest ang private developer nga that's working with the provincial government of 1.5 billion pesos para sa Mactan Expo, which is where mahitabo ang 48th ASEAN Summit, ang mismong plenary meeting para sa mga okasyon. So karon we're seeing there's a lot of security personnel, they walk by pairs, makita nato sila sa mga dalan sa Manuel L. Quezon National Highway all the way to Punta Engaño Road, where most of our delegates are staying in the hotels there. Og dire kay makita pod nato nga they're also making sure nga security is checked regularly. Kaso na in mga disruptions that we may not know. We've had fair weather so far, and so since last week pa, like Saturday, nisulti na si Cebu Governor Pamela Baricuatro around Saturday na we were ready to accept na gyud sa mga delegates at full capacity. And if you take a look right now, everything's going smoothly and operating as planned, as intended, as planned.
Right, buyag. Para ma-understand po nato kung anong na 10,000 nga security forces from the province and from outside, no? Kanang augmenting forces, no? Kung naakay summit in any ASEAN summit, ang implication ana kay tanang ang tawag sa ila ASEAN member state leaders, pwede president, pwede prime minister, manganhi sila in one location and that's where they meet. This happens either twice or once a year. So, and aside from them, obviously the leaders, right? Naapod diri sa Cebu karon tanang foreign minister, tanang economic minister, pati na pod ang ministers or cabinet secretaries who are under the ASEAN socio-cultural community. So inalakadaghan ang high-level VIPs diri karon sa Mactan and I guess spilling over to Cebu City as well, right? Kay of course naay uban nga mo choose to stay there or mo bisita ngadto. And on top of the ASEAN delegates as in kanang government officials, I think earlier this year ang estimate kaya 1,000 up to 2,000 media may be flying in not just from the Philippines, but from all over Southeast Asia and even all over the greater Asian region, right, to cover the ASEAN Summit. So, sa may natabo kanina. So, kanina, puro preparatory meeting. Preparatory meeting beforehand in Cebu and online as well. So, ang mga meeting gaina, nag-meet ang mga foreign minister, nag-meet ang economic ministers, nag-meet po ang economic ministers, foreign ministers, ug pati na po ang ministers who are under the socio-cultural cluster. Nag-meet po separately ang economic ministers and foreign ministers. So, kung nagbakan mo meeting, ang point ani kay para pag-abot sa leaders meetings, ugma, duha ka meeting na siya, kumbaga na-iron out na ang fine details of the discussions. And all that needs to happen is for the leaders to, of course, make their manifestations, ang tawag dyan, intervention. Unya, from there, i-iron out na lang ang final statement sa ASEAN. So, ang giingon sa DFA, Department of Foreign Affairs of the Philippines, they expect or they hope to come out with, and they're confident, they say, to come out with an ASEAN Leaders Summit that will declare the position of the bloc on the situation in the Middle East. Kay mo ng point karon sa 48th ASEAN Summit, as John mentioned gaina, unlike in previous summits, very laser-focused ang summit karon to address, not just address, but also to shield ASEAN, possibly, from future disruptions similar to the one caused by the US and Israel's war on Iran in the Middle East. Kabalo na ba mo? I'm sure naka-experience na pod mo ni taas ang presyo sa gas, sa diesel, pati po ng ubang basic commodities, ni saka ang presyo. So, obviously, the Philippines is very much aware of this. In fact, we are under a state of national energy emergency. Other ASEAN countries have also felt the crunch of the crisis in the Middle East. So, muna ang focus karon sa ASEAN leaders, ang volatility of oil supply and oil prices, food security, pati na po ng protection of ASEAN nationals across the world. But in the context of the Middle East, of course, you will think about the migrant workers from Southeast Asia. So, also to add, nga nung dako, big deal ang ASEAN Summit. Usually, kung naay summit, leaders will take this as an opportunity nga mag-meet po sila sa ilahang mga counterparts on the sidelines, ang tawag, sideline meetings. So, kung kibali, si President Marcos gaina met with the Prime Minister of Vietnam, newly appointed for the first time ever. It's also his first ASEAN Summit. So, of course, nag-meeting sila. Normal po na siya, expected na siya na kanang kung naibago nga leader, mo meeting jud ka sa chairperson. But I guess the highlight of, well, before I talk about that, also, nag-host po si President Marcos of special BIMP Iaga, summit ng BIMP Iaga. It's a sub-regional grouping, Brunei, Indonesia, Malaysia, and the Philippines, pero specific to Palawan and parts of Mindanao. So, ang idea sa BIMP Iaga kanang mututok siya sa development of parts of Indonesia, Malaysia, the whole of Brunei, and parts of the Philippines nga often neglected by development. And these are areas na pinpoint na potential for growth. So, nag-meeting sila gaina, wala pa yung outcome document. Kung naana, of course, we will report on that. But I think the highlight in terms of regional politics nga meeting gaina, as a side meeting, gitipok ni President Marcos ang iyahang counterparts from Cambodia and Thailand. As you would know, katong July 2025, nag-spill over into hostilities ang border tensions between Cambodia and Thailand, na ay confrontations, military confrontations, ni nagkalal, ni die down, ni flare up again. But finally, in December 2025, truce or ceasefire was negotiated. But experts have characterized this as a quite fragile ceasefire. And the Philippines, of course, as chair of ASEAN, isa po ni siya ka things that I guess would keep it up at night, no? Making sure na dili magkagubot utro between Cambodia and Thailand sa border. So nag-meeting sila gaina, nag-joint press conference po sila. In so many words, Marcos said that Cambodia and Thailand both acknowledge na it's a time for peace, not a time for war. And coming from the statements of the leaders of Cambodia and Thailand, murag cautious but optimistic siguro ang tone in that they are talking. Their foreign ministers are expected to talk further and perhaps thresh out ilang mga disagreements kay border dispute siya where na po sila overlapping land and sea claims. So that's one thing that of course experts and analysts are also worried about in the context of ASEAN. So mupala siya so far ang mga gipang. Actually gayon na po I'm sorry, I have to mention this also. Gibring up ni Foreign Affairs Secretary Maria Teresa Lazaro ang situation sa Myanmar, although this was not public. Kay siya man ang special envoy of the ASEAN chairperson for Myanmar. So nag-report siya gaina sa iyang counterparts na foreign ministers during the ASEAN foreign ministers meeting. So ugma again, eyes on the prize silang ilang discussion will really center on oil prices and oil supply issues, food security, as well as the protection of ASEAN nationals in the context of geopolitical conflict, of course backdrop by the tensions in the Middle East and hostilities in the Middle East. Mubalik ni ugma, live ni otro ugma, to talk to you about what will happen tomorrow and what will have happened tomorrow. So in the morning and the evening, we'll bring you recaps as well, just to make sure that you are updated with everything that's happening here in the island of Mactan for the 48th ASEAN Summit and related summits. Wala pa niya nalimutan? Okay na to so far. So, tomorrow, bright and early, and then tomorrow again, late at night, we will be giving you updates, going live on Rappler. If you want more updates na live update page, ang Rappler dedicated to the 48th ASEAN Summit and related summits. This has been Bea Cupin.
John Sitchon.
Salamat kaayo for watching. Good evening.